Travelex this evening. They've hosted a few roundabouts for us before, and this is the first Agile Roundabout that they've done. So I'm just going to start off and let everyone know where the toilets are. So if you don't already know, if you go out the way you came in, past the lifts, the ladies is on the left, the gents on the right. The fire exit, there, yeah?
Yeah, right there.
And yeah, that's kind of the housekeeping bits. Okay, so I'll just tell you, before I go into this, I'll tell you a little bit about us. If you don't know, we are TRG Recruitment. We are a specialist tech recruitment company, and our founders started the Agile Roundabout a few years ago, just over 3 years ago. Two reasons really. One, to give something back to the Agile community, and the second was really for us to learn about the space that we work in. Because as recruiters, what did we know about Agile when we started talking to people like you guys and learning from you? So it's gone from strength to strength, and we're really happy to have you guys in our community with us tonight. Okay, so our speakers this evening, so our host speaker is Umer Saeed.
Yes.
Here he is. And he's from Travelex. He's a Scrum Master who's doing quite a bit of coaching as well at Travelex. And he's going to do quite an interactive talk this evening. How well do you know Agile? Next up we have Salvatore Rinaldo over here. Okay, and Salvatore is currently at LendInvest. And he's going to do an interesting talk for us on uncovering common Agile anti-patterns. Okay, and finally we have Dragan at the back of the room, okay? Dragan Jojic, and Dragan's got a really good talk on the language of outcomes. So we should have some interesting ideas for you this evening. Okay, so if anyone uses social media, these are our handles here, and if you are going to tweet or anything, we would just ask whether it's good or bad. Good only, I hope. But please, if you wouldn't mind, hashtagging Agile Roundabout on Travelex as well. That'd be great. Is that it? Should we do this now? Yeah? Okay, get this out of the way. So the UX Roundabout you can see is here on the 10th of September, JS Roundabout at Zava, 12th of September, DevOps at Bulb, 24th. And this is going to be a special one, guys. I'm not going to go into any more detail. This is going to be special. So when this comes out, snap up a ticket. That's all I can say for now. Okay, is that it? Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Umer. So Umer will speak for about 20 minutes. As usual, we will do 5 minutes question time, and then there'll be a quick comfort break, and then our next speaker will go. Okay, so I hope you have a good evening. Enjoy your run. Welcome, Umer.
Thank you. Okay, welcome to Travelex, everyone. So, as Lisa mentioned, my name is Umer Saeed. I am the Scrum Master / Agile Coach here at Travelex. I've been working here for about 9 months, working with a lot of the engineering teams. I've been generally working as a Scrum Master for the last 7 years. I've done a lot of hybrid roles within the Agile space, and I've worked with all different types of companies, and I'm here to talk to you about how well people actually know about Agile. So, in my previous experiences, I've come across companies, I've come across development teams about what they know about Scrum in general, and a lot of people, I was surprised actually they don't know why they're using Scrum. Now I've come across a few terms which I wanted to share about the most common things about why people are using Scrum. So these are the things I've actually heard myself personally. Sometimes you get people saying that we use Scrum because everyone is using Scrum. You know, maybe it's the latest thing on the market right now. They see another department in the same company using Scrum, so maybe we should use it as well and roll it out to everyone. Maybe that's another reason why you would use it. Also, it's the latest trend in the industry. If you read articles online saying, you know, Scrum is the best, blah, 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 then maybe that might be a reason why a company adopts to use this methodology. Another one I've come across is that Scrum is going to fix all your problems. So I want to focus a little bit about fixing problems. So I don't know if anyone's aware, there's a guy called Ron Jeffries. Anyone heard of him? Yeah. If you haven't, he's one of the software developers that has teamed up with 16 other software developers back in 2001 to create the Agile Manifesto. So these guys got together, they created something out of extreme programming, which is more lightweight and works well in sort of Agile methodologies. And he said a quote very recently: Scrum doesn't fix your problems. Scrum, it shows you your problems, and you, the people, as a development team, are there to fix your own problems. So that's quite true in many terms, because when I come across teams adopting Scrum, they just don't know why they're using it in the first place, and essentially what they're trying to do is trying to resolve a problem that they currently have in the current ways of working, which they're not aware of, and they will go to Scrum naturally because they see it fixing people's problems elsewhere, and they go and adopt this to try and highlight what is going wrong and where they need to make improvements. So that's one thing that's really stuck with me, and I've always pitched that to people. Just doing Scrum because someone else is doing it might not work for you. So it all depends on the company you work for, the teams, the products you build. If there's something that's not working, then Scrum is a way to trial something, highlight your problems, and then possibly fix it around that way. Based on that, there was a data that was released very recently by a company called /Data. So they did a survey for a lot of tech companies out there in the industry today. I think they covered about 10 or 11 different sectors about what project management methodologies they're currently using. And Scrum was the highest one. It took 37% in the survey. Does anyone want to guess what the second highest methodology was from that survey? Just shout random stuff. Prince, Kanban. Any other recommendations? Waterfall? No. None. So this is the survey. So Scrum took 37%. The next highest one was nothing at all. So you can see there's 10 different ways you can pick a methodology, but you pick the one that you hear about the most. Maybe you see other people using it. Waterfall only took 15%. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, actually these numbers don't add up to 100, but that's because there was a multiple choice questionnaire on there, so some might use a hybrid of this. But if you see, Scrum is the top, nothing at all, and nothing specific are one of the top ones on there. So this article was named "It's either Scrum or nothing." So if you do go into most tech companies, the majority of the time you're going to find that they'll be either using Scrum or they won't be using anything. And most of the time they will naturally fall into a hybrid kind of methodology that they've made up just to try and make themselves work more efficiently or whatever. But this is one of the reasons, where people are asking questions, why should we use Scrum? And the other thing that I really wanted to know is do people know enough about Scrum to use it? So one thing I realized when people ask me what do I do and what is Scrum, I'm actually quite surprised. A lot of people have their knowledge and understanding of Scrum ends at it's the 4 ceremonies. You run the 4 ceremonies and you're a Scrum team. That's it, end of story. But then I reverse ask them these type of questions, and it gets them to start thinking, oh, actually, we didn't think about that. We need to consider a little bit more about what we can use Scrum for, and how can we improve our teams to more self-organization, empower the teams, work on things that people are not aware of. So the last thing you want to do is end up working on just doing ceremonies, because you might end up like this guy here. And I've seen people in the past, they do look like this. This is not a Scrum team that I would happily work with. So if your team looks like this, you really need to reconsider what you're doing wrong. So because I ask these types of questions to get people thinking, I'm really keen to learn about other people's knowledge of what Scrum is and generally what Agile is. So what we're going to do today is do a pop quiz. So you're all here and you're now going to take a live exam. So now I'm going to hand it over to you guys, and I want to learn about how much of Scrum and Agile you know. So what we're going to do is I'm going to explain some rules, and you guys are going to take an exam, and it'll be about 15, 20 minutes. And then we're going to see a leaderboard of who gets the most correct answers. Does that sound good? Right, here's the rules. Each member in the audience is going to compete, and there's going to be a multiple choice questions to gain the most points. I'll explain the scoring in a minute. There's only one correct answer per question. And as you play, once you've answered a question, you're going to see your own personal leaderboard about how many points you've currently scored. The person at the end with the most points will win, and they will get a prize. And there is a prize for the first, second, and third places. So you guys will be winning some really cool stuff that I've bought. So the higher you rank, the better the prize. So I have some prizes here, which I will showcase to you. I know you guys haven't seen this. First place. By the way, I didn't get this from Tesco. I got it from more a high-end place. like Sainsbury's. So these are the prices. So what I need you guys to do now is follow these rules. If you can open up your phones and go to this URL. When you add your name, if you can put your full name, just so we know who the winners are, because if there's like 5 Johns, I'm not going to know which John is the winner. There's no obligation. If you don't want to play, you don't have to. It's a bit of fun. While you're doing that, I'll explain the next set of rules. So you're going to see a question on the screen, and it's going to be very time boxed, because I only have half an hour for this talk. So I'm not going to be pausing it in between to answer any questions. I'll take questions afterwards. But you're going to have 30 seconds to read the question and answer it, and submit your answer through the app. After that, once you've answered that question, you'll see what the reasoning behind the answer was underneath. So you'll have 20 seconds to review that before you see the next question. As you're going along, you'll see a live leaderboard underneath the question as well. And if for any reason there's 2 people at the end that have the same score and are in first place, the quiz will basically detect the person who scored the fastest in the last question they got correct as the winner. Yeah, so I checked that, and the maximum is 10,000. Is everyone having problems? Anyone having problems?
Signal's really bad. Is there a Wi-Fi?
Okay. There is a Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi man. Yeah. Is it you in, yeah? I'm going to start it after. Maybe I'll just put it on the screen. I'll put it on the screen. Yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Happy Turtle 57.
Correct.
Question. We're not supposed to click on that yet, right?
Yeah.
Because when you do, you get taken to this.
Can you quickly sign in? Sign up. A random email. It doesn't have to be real.
Okay.
What's the code again?
The what?
Quiz.
Oh, sorry. 021085.
Side by side.
What's it saying?
This, and then it says it's giving this. I think it. You'll have to.
I'm going to manually start it. So once I've clicked start, it should appear. But stay here, in case I need you as a test. Everyone ready? No?
But right now it's not giving me the. Right now it's not giving me the link to join now.
It's fine. That's the link. It will pop up because you're on the URL.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't sign up. Yeah.
Yeah. Sign up.
Shall we sign up?
Yeah. Sign up. It shouldn't ask you to sign up.
Yep.
What's it
51
saying?
users connected.
That seems about right.
Yeah.
That's enough, I think. How much time do I have?
Well, you've got 20 minutes to speak and you started off quite fast.
Hopefully this should be 10 more minutes and it should be fine. Yeah. Guys, we're going to get started because we're running low on time.
Is everyone in? Everyone in? Yeah?
So the last slide, quickly just go through how the scoring works. There's 15 questions. Remember, there's 30 seconds to answer the question. For every correct answer, you get 5 points. If you get a wrong answer, you get 0. The person who gets the answer correct the fastest in the room will get an additional 3 points. So that will be 8 points for that question. The second fastest will get 2, and the third will get 1 extra. So altogether, there's 75 points in total for correct answers. That's irrespective of if you're the fastest. But if you are the fastest on every question, then there's a total of 120. But I don't think anyone's going to get that.
Oh, are these the answers?
No, go ahead. So I'm now going to start the quiz, and I'm going to hand it over to you guys and check the leaderboard. Let's go. Just check and see it works.
Are you not taking part here, Mark?
No, because
And when it says submitted, you just wait for the next question.
yeah. Actually, I might check to see how many have submitted. Can I? Oh yeah, all the answers. But you just see, you don't see like.
Yeah.
I see HR team connect. Oh, that's quite a lot of answers. 65. Yeah, so most people did connect anyway. Yeah. So you get 20 seconds to review. If you got it right, so 75% of you got this right. If you want to know why you got it wrong, there's a description underneath for you to quickly read. If there's any you want to discuss afterwards, then just remember the question and come and speak to me after.
Holy shit.
I can see the leaderboard, Dave.
Sorry.
I can see the leaderboard.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you're third. For how long, though?
Yeah, I don't know testing.
This is going to be interesting. Do you know what this is?
I'm going to go off the leaderboard now.
I want to know the percentage of how many will get this right.
I knew it.
It's a game changer, that one, isn't it?
I actually knew this.
Huh?
I actually knew this.
Did you get that one? I like. You can't change your answer.
I don't like this
You can't
game.
change it.
I know.
Yeah.
Read all the options.
Don't rush, because people are trying to be the fastest. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Get them extra points in there. So I like doing tricky questions like this, where not everyone will get this right. I might hide after this. Oh, shit. Can you see the next question?
Yes. 12 seconds left.
So my one is stuck.
Yeah. That's weird.
But if it goes to the next screen,
Yeah.
maybe that might
4
change.
seconds left.
Oh, it's working. It's working now, yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of people failing this.
Yeah, I know.
9000 is from the film.
2001 Space Odyssey. No, it's not 9,000. I just always call them HAL. It's one of my favorite films.
Who's a Travelex employee?
I don't know.
Is it Jonathan?
Not me. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Can't be. It's got to be Dotty at the back. I don't know. That's a controversial Travelex
Yes, I'll check it out.
employee. It must be Dotty at the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see your leaderboard underneath? Yeah, you see
Yes.
that. Yeah. So where are you? You're ninth. Oh man, you have to get faster.
I know.
Get them extra points in.
I know.
Came out. It must be about 10 years old now.
Oh, Travelex employee dropped.
The PBR is 10% of the sprint.
Yeah, but you don't time box how long that takes. You do that every day. You should be doing that twice.
This is a stupid question.
It's a trick question.
Another one you missed.
I might need to run away after this, like hide downstairs or something.
Yeah, that's true.
Everyone.
That should be 100%.
Because remember, there's like 120 points in total for the fastest correct answers for all of them. But 75 generally if you get.
18%. Yeah, I know.
That was high, yeah. You got to chuck an easy one in there at some point. That's the thing, like, you know, when you said, like, everyone here is very mature agilists. There's always something you can catch them out on. That not that they don't know.
Not
Not catching out, but like getting them to think more about stuff.
Yeah. Thought-provoking.
Thought-provoking, that's the word.
Yes.
Oh, now this could be either of these. Come on. I mean, that's the thing. A quiz messes with your head. I see 3 correct answers there.
That's why I did that.
Maybe there are.
See, look, this one is like
For
Hi.
the live feed, can I get the quiz pin again?
021 085.
021
85, yeah.
The live feed up there.
Is that that? Yeah.
Oh my god.
Wait. Live feed, he means not the live stream, YouTube stream. He means this?
Yeah.
Okay. See this? After.
I honestly don't know what ideal days are.
I don't think
That's the
anyone.
first time
This
I've
will
heard.
be very split. I guarantee it will just be guesses.
It's the first time I've heard of that too.
Yeah. Even that's what everyone's discussing now. They're like, yeah. Yeah. Make it good. Look at that one.
This is not right.
That's not right.
Like, no, I know the answer, but I said that's not right.
Park the old Scrum Master.
Purposely did that. Oh no, there's only 2 left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Super quick, super quick. Okay, I'll do it afterwards, after the whole thing.
I don't know.
You may as well guess. You've got a 25% chance.
Everybody is the king. 58, 59 and 60.
It's all on this.
The last question is the killer.
Yeah. Last question, guys.
That's not fair, we're going against the machine there.
Be quick.
I got this wrong.
I made the last one a little bit easy, just to get the last minute points. I expect at least 80% correct. Oh, close, close. All right, well done, guys. Give yourselves a round of applause for that. That's the end of the quiz. So this is the final leaderboard. Very quickly, I'm going to be handing out the prizes now because we're out of time. But if you do have any questions on any of the questions, come and see me after at any time once all the presentations are done. But in first place is Manav. He's standing here. He's not cheating, I promise. So come here. First prize, please. You can show them what it is.
I'd like to thank my parents.
You want to show them what it is?
Oh wow! I've got a Bluetooth Sony headphones. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Hal 9000. Who's that? Welcome, Hal. Well done. Thank you. You want to show them the gifts?
Yeah. Leather journal. Idea for my next contract. Available from hire in October.
Last but not least, Dragan.
So I know something about this.
So he's one of the Agile speakers today. So thanks for listening, guys. If you have any questions, come and see me afterwards, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you.
Okay, guys, we are a little bit behind, but if anyone needs to quickly nip to the loo and grab a drink, we'll maybe have just like 2-minute comfort break, and then we'll get cracking with Salvatore. All right, then.
I'll leave that up. That's all right. I'll leave this one up now, just in case, and then.
Oh yeah.
Forum is open with them.
That's all we are live streaming now.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Do I need to use the microphone by any chance?
So sorry, this is Sean. It's cool.
We're a bit behind on time. I'll try and go into it.
First time at live streaming, so okay, I think we're ready. Just take the bottle fill. There might be some more in the fridge.
Can you use the hand mic?
I wasn't gonna.
What's wrong?
I think he wants me to test to see if it's working. Yeah, it's working. Okay, cool.
Okay, stop trying, everyone.
Okay. Hi everyone. Time's ticking, so let's get going. Hello everyone, I'm Salvatore. I work as an Agile Coach, so I help companies make the most of Agile once they decide they want to give it a go. Okay. Tonight I'm going to talk about anti-patterns that I normally see with Agile adoption. Before I do that, I want to say thank you to TRG for inviting me to speak here tonight. It's great to see such a big crowd. And thank you, Travelex, for hosting us as well. Okay, let's get going. So, to tell you this story, I have made up a few fictional characters. One of them is called Dan. He's in charge. Software engineer Laura, she's one of the technical leads on our project. And Anna is a product owner. Finally, I have Pete. He is coming into the story a bit later. He's looking for a job, actually. Okay, so Dan, Laura, and Anna have had a chat about whether or not they should hire a Scrum Master or an Agile Coach. Let's assume they're going to do Scrum, right? That's what most people are trying out these days. All right, so Dan says, well, you know what? I don't know if I can justify the cost right now. We're a small company, relatively small. Everything needs to be aligned to the budget. Why don't you guys go to a training course, learn a bit about Agile? By the time you come back, you'll know enough about it to give it a go. Okay, let's do that then. So they go to that training course, Laura and Anna in particular, and a few other developers. And actually, Laura and Anna haven't been working for that long, 5 or 6 years, right, in industry. So they don't really remember waterfall. So in the training course, they learn how Agile solves all the problems created by waterfall development, which for them is kind of a new thing to learn, okay? And then they learn about Agile, which is both incremental and iterative. And they love the idea that from now on, they'll be able to develop products like this. So little by little, in shippable increments, they'll be able to deliver value continuously to a customer. Okay, this feels great. So they can't wait to go back to the office and try this out. One thing they learn at the training course is that Agile and Waterfall have approached value, risk, and adaptability in slightly different ways, right? So with an Agile project, you're hoping to deliver value early and then continuously. And that's not typically happening with Waterfall. Now, with an Agile project, risk is supposed to decrease very, very early in the project, whereas that's something you don't get with Waterfall. And the same can be said for adaptability. In an Agile project, your adaptability should stay high throughout the project, whereas with Waterfall, it gets reduced pretty early. Okay, that's the only concept that's kind of new to them. And as much as they understand this slide, they can't see how they can apply this in the workplace directly, because actually they don't really have any experience of Waterfall. Okay? Right, so back to the office. The next project they're going to work on is going to be an online bookshop. So Dan says, hey, we're building an online bookshop. Let's get started. Now, if I was the product owner, how many of you in the room are product owners? Yeah, don't be shy. Okay, awesome. If I was a product owner, this is more or less what I would do in my first or second iteration. If I had to build a bookshop, and I had to do it in an Agile way, I would have to think of ways in which I can deliver value to my customer early, and then continuously. And at the same time, I want to be able to approach risk in a way that allows me to decrease risk very early on in the project. So I would do something like this. I would build a very thin slice of the end-to-end customer journey, solving a customer problem. The customer wants to buy a book. What I'll do is, instead of investing a lot of time building each step in the customer journey in detail, I'll build a very simple catalog. I'll literally make up a PDF book and hard code it on there. And then the customer can click on that, see how much money that's costing, and then checking it out, entering some credit card details perhaps. And when you get to the payment screen, sorry, it's too early. I haven't done any payment service implementation. It fails. Why do I find this useful? I find this useful because A, it's taking out a lot of risk. It allows me to go to my development team and discuss, hey, what are the integration points? What are the interfaces we're going to need to build this solution? And I'm forcing all the developers, potentially from different teams, to talk to each other early on in the process so that risk can decrease quickly, as we discussed. And at the same time, if I'm a customer, I can see what seems to be an end-to-end product working since day one, right? It doesn't do much. In fact, you can't check out at this point in time. But chances are that when the customer comes to my first demo, they'll say, oh, this is great. And the next thing I'd like you to do is the payment service. So we can get starting, we can get some value out and we can start buying some books. Okay, what I see in practice, so what Laura, Anna, and Dan will do is something else. They'll do this in their first iteration. Okay? And I want to stay on this slide for a minute. I think it's worth it. So how do they get here? Let's put things in the context. So chances are that Anna and Laura are working in a company where you have architects and designers who are busy, shared on multiple projects, and they're working with multiple teams. So they're not part of their cross-functional Scrum team, if you like. So typically, Anna, the product owner, will engage an architect and then maybe a designer and say, this is the next project we're going to work on. We're going to do it in an agile way. We're going to use sprints. I need you, the architect, to design the system. And I need you, designer, to design the user journey. Now, these guys are busy. They're working on multiple projects. They only want to do this once. So what they are going to do next, the architect is going to give you a fully fledged solution of what the final architecture should look like for a product like this. And the designer will give you a fully fledged set of wireframes for what the user journey should look like in the end product. Yeah? Does this sound familiar to perhaps how things go in real life? Okay, now, Anna wants to do things iteratively. She's been to the training course, she gets Agile. When she comes back to the office, she's going to encounter some resistance from some of her developers as well. Because when she goes to the development team and she says, hey, we're going to do this iteratively, the development team is going to look at the wireframes and they're going to be like, we have the designs here. This is what we have to implement. Why don't we just implement it the way it is? What's the point of iterating now? Right? What's the point of doing this when we know that the final product is actually going to look more like this? Yeah? So in the end, Anna and Laura, who have just been to an Agile training course, they get it, but they won't be able to apply it directly to their workplace because they're not ready to take on all the organizational design issues that should be resolved before Agile becomes the status quo. So they'll give up in the end, and they'll do this instead. Now, in the first demo, they're going to show you a fairly refined first page where, as a customer trying to buy a book, you can see a search panel up there where you can type in what book you want to buy. You can see a tab view where you can actually navigate books by category. And all of that is great. But if you're a customer of this Scrum team, how much feedback can you actually give on the first iteration? The first iteration is definitely an increment, but it's not an attempt to build a viable product. It doesn't show how it solves the problem that the customer is having, buying a book. Okay. So what's going to happen next then is essentially this team, with all the best intentions in the world to try Agile, will end up doing something like this instead. They will have designed the entire system up front. They will have designed the entire graphic user interface up front. And then they'll use sprints to implement it one piece at a time. Implement it and validate it. And some sprints, they may have a potentially shippable increment. Some sprints, they might not. In the end, to them, it doesn't really matter because they know that because of the way they're working, the whole product is going to get realized at the very end when they assembled it all together. To me, this is an anti-pattern. Why? Because if I think of what value, adaptability, and risk curves I get when I work like this, to me, they look much more like a waterfall project than what they should look like in an Agile project. Precisely like that. So one thing that I've seen happening over and over again in the last 5 or 6 years trying to implement Agile with development teams is that Agile without iterations really goes back to being waterfall. You're doing stand-ups, you're doing sprints, you're doing retrospectives, you're doing demos, but you're not really delivering value early. And the risk is not decreasing early either. Okay, that's the first anti-pattern. How many of you have encountered this in real life? Okay, I'm glad. Okay, it's not just me then. All right. Now, chances are that you'll have done this with some teams at some point in the past, but the problem with the first anti-pattern is that sometimes by the time you realize it, it might be too late. So I want to give you a shortcut. How can you detect this anti-pattern early on in the process? Is by going to your demo. The second anti-pattern is what I call demo but no review. I'm going to use Scrum-friendly terminology here, but don't worry if you don't do Scrum. It just applies the same way to other methodologies, including Kanban. Let's say you've just built an increment of product. The idea is that now you are showing this increment to your stakeholders so that they can give you feedback, and then based on the feedback, based on the learnings, you'll decide what to do next. Okay? What I see going on with most teams trying Agile these days is something along the lines of, well, we know what the final solution looks like. We're building it one piece at a time. We're not really using the demo to learn. We're using the demo to show you some progress. So development teams are now using demos to show that they've been busy, to show that they've been fully utilized. Poor product owners don't have access to customers anymore in sprint reviews. And Dan, who is in charge, I mean, he's a really good guy, but now he compares the full scope of the project compared to what the team has achieved so far, and the only thing he can take away from it is, oh my God, we're so far behind. So this is what I call a second anti-pattern of Agile adoption, demo but no review. Why is this an anti-pattern? Because it reduces customer collaboration, and it makes you less responsive to change. How many of you have experienced this anti-pattern in practice? Okay, stop doing this. All right. The third and last anti-pattern I want to talk about is what I call the PO becomes the user story factory. Okay. So what do you think is going to happen when Dan and Laura bump into each other in the office? Of course, Dan wants to know how things are going. Laura says, awesome, I've just finished a task. What's the next thing that's going to happen? Dan is going to have a word with the product owner. Hey, we're late on this project. What are you doing? Developers don't have work. All right, I'll write a user story. How many of you have experienced this anti-pattern in the workplace? Okay. Now, this is really a shame, isn't it? Because product owners should be focusing on value, should be focusing on customers. And I feel that often we've turned the role of a product owner into some kind of delivery manager with user story writing skills. Yeah? Okay. This is also an anti-pattern, for sure. So what's going on here? So in a large organization, you've probably come across the first Larman's Law of Organizational Behavior. He's written 5 of them. You can check them out if you're interested. And Craig Larman says, well, organizations are implicitly optimized to resist change, to preserve the status quo for mid-managers and specialists. Now, in a medium-sized company, or even in a small-sized company, you may still have specialists, but I suspect you won't really have that many mid-level managers. So what's going on here? Why do we have these problems in a small-scale setup as well? So I think it's fair to say that our inability to iterate properly, in other words, our inability to apply Agile properly to the workplace, can lead to the utilization mindset. Because we end up working a fixed time, fixed scope projects, where often the fixed scope is actually self-inflicted due to our inability to identify the iteration opportunities. Are you with me? Yeah? So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. It's hard to say whether the utilization mindset is the root cause of the problem or whether it's a symptom of a problem. But I've often seen these two together. The inability to iterate and the utilization mindset are often found together in the same workplace. Okay, what do you think is going to happen to Laura in 18 months' time? She hasn't learned much. She feels like, it's time to move on. She's gone from one user story to the next. It's been fixed scope, fixed time all along.
John's going to come along.
Yeah. Which means that Dan now has to hire a developer. Of course, he'll do this because he's in charge. So he interviews Pete, and he says, don't worry if you don't know much about Agile. You learn it on the job. As if they were the experts and could actually teach him. And now Pete says, great interview. Fine, sure. What's going to happen to Pete 18 months later? We'll find out. What's going to happen to product owner, Anna? She doesn't have access to customers anymore. And she's been working with teams who actually haven't learned much about Agile, besides doing stand-ups, demos, and planning sessions. When you're lucky, because if you're late on a project, you might decide not to do retrospectives because they take up time. Or not to do demos because the stakeholders aren't coming anyway. Okay. Well, it turns out that Pete actually did learn something about Agile. He got really interested and he studied something about it in his own time. So a few years later, Pete is giving us some advice about agility. So he thinks that the utilization mindset kills your ability to iterate. But it's also your inability to iterate that may lead to the utilization mindset. It's an interesting perspective, right?
What do you mean by utilization mindset?
Keeping people busy as a measure of progress. Measuring outputs instead of outcomes. He also thinks, hey, I think in a time where we can go live 20 times a day, we have all these tools, continuous delivery. It's amazing. Really, we should be doing Agile to figure out what customers want. The bottom line is, we do Agile because we don't want to make stuff that no one wants. It's about value, right? So we must give product owners and teams access to customers. Okay. Last not least, and that's something that I've picked up in recent years, we often talk about transformation and large-scale Agile as an interesting challenge, and it is. But I actually find that small organizations need Agile and Agile expertise as much as big organizations do. Why? Because they have a higher business risk and they really need to nail down their value proposition design. They need to make products that customers will want to use. Or they might even go out of business. So Agile and lean thinking is even more valuable in a small-scale setup, I think. Okay, that's everything I wanted to share with you tonight. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, just fire at me now.
Okay, guys, I know this microphone doesn't work for the room, but the live streaming is working now. So we're going to have 5 minutes question time with Salvatore, and we'll use the microphone. So who has a question? Anyone? Any questions? Anyone? Anyone? Yes.
What are your suggestions?
Yeah, just those for the live streaming. There you go.
What sort of suggestions do you have to improve iterations and sort of iterate more?
I would say recognize the problem in the first place. And, in the same way that Anna and Laura went to an Agile training course, I think we should send everyone on an Agile training course if we take it seriously. By having managers who understand the difference between incremental and iterative, you're more likely to succeed and get the right level of pressure from above.
If I was to go to a manager tomorrow and try and say in one sentence what the difference is between iterative and incremental, what would that sentence be?
Iterative is about value delivered early and then continuously. Incremental is one piece at a time, and then we assemble it all at the end. Yeah? I don't know if that did it.
Is this any different to MVP development?
So MVP, which is now, you probably know what MVP is. It's a minimum viable product. So your first iterations should actually build an MVP, right? Which is the least amount of work you could do to start showing some value to your customers. Often we misuse MVP and we end up doing more work than we should. It goes back to the principle that was mentioned in the quiz earlier. Yeah. Simplicity, maximize the amount of work not done. Yeah.
Any more questions?
So I would like to know how, like a BA actually fits into agile delivery. In terms
Business
of
analyst.
Yeah, business analyst. In terms of requirement-wise, because I sort of seen from like you've got like requirements and then you got validation and implement, and obviously from requirements again, and then do that compared to waterfall where you got your fixed set of requirements.
Yeah.
And then I just want to know what is the difference and how actually BA works in terms of agile way.
Do you work as part of a Scrum team, or do you do Agile with your development team?
I used to, but I literally facing the issue that you had earlier, where it's literally doing the full set of requirements, but we're delivering like iterative.
Okay, maybe this answer is not going to completely address your question, but let me know if that's the case. I would say if you're a BA and you want to do things in an agile way, you're still a BA, and we still need your skills to analyze problems and flesh out requirements. It's about clarity, right? It's about working with your development teams to make it clear to them what needs to be built. But I think if you work with the product owner's role there is really to highlight the right trade-off opportunities early on in the process. Where is the value that we can deliver to a customer early, and how do we address risk? And then based on that input, the entire team, so developers, business analysts, and QA engineers, whoever is involved, designers, they have to work together to identify those iterations.
Yeah.
Hi, what do you think about design sprints? And is that an anti-pattern in the same way that you...
No, I don't think it is, actually. I like the idea, and when you do them at the right time, they can provide really good value. So if you're in a discovery phase, for example, you might use design sprints to understand what your customers might want to use in your product.
So it's about the timing within the overall delivery.
I think so, yeah. I think that the tricky aspect there is to know when you should be building versus discovering, and often you have to go back and forth between the two. It's not a straight line.
We have time for, I was going to say one more, but I see the two hands up, so we'll go with you two guys. Okay.
I can see all the other roles can do it iteratively, but the difficulty with architects, they often ask us to clarify the requirements around everything and the complexity in order for them to plan the capacity and all the infrastructure. How do you get them to do it iteratively?
So there's something called emergent architecture, which is the agile take on architecture. And I don't know if you're familiar with emergent architecture, but if we follow emergent architecture principles and practices, we should, we should be able to absorb that. It's a way to make your architectural requirement fit into your iterative schedule. Yeah, instead of doing design up front.
But do they need the hardware capacity?
Well, adaptability needs to be high, right? So your ability to actually refactor things or introduce new modules or needs to stay high throughout the project. It's important not to lock yourself up into particular solutions too early, I guess. There's a lean principle that I like to mention. Defer decisions to the latest possible moment. And I think the best architecture is one that allows you to defer important decisions to the latest reasonable moments. Yeah, responsible moments.
I've got two more questions, so I'll give you the mic, and you might have to shout out.
Less of a question, more of a statement, actually. So you said MVP is all about releasing value to a customer. I would disagree with that in a sense and say that it's actually about learning what your customer wants, which it isn't necessarily releasing value to them. It's getting data back for your product owner so that they can carry on making decisions. That was all I was going to say.
It's about learning.
Yeah.
I would totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we have one more question, and it's our very first question of our live stream. And it's from Glenn Bowering, of course. Have you had any success with dual track Scrum?
With?
Dual track Scrum.
Dual track Scrum?
Yeah.
Would he be able to clarify what he means by that?
Glenn, can you clarify, please?
So dual track Scrum is
where you've got a sprint running ahead with very much more design focus.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Sorry, yeah. So dual track Scrum is where you've got a sprint running ahead, which is very much a design focus, which does a lot of UX, a lot of design work, that then feeds the subsequent sprint. So it's like that analysis, that design build running in a continuous fashion, one feeding the other.
Yeah.
Two independent teams, one feeds the other.
We have tried it in the past a couple of times, and it seems to work. It seems to make it easier for teams to plan the next steps. Though I still think that if you measure everything that's going on, you might end up with iterations that should be twice as long. Yeah. So yes, it definitely works. It might be an intermediate step to achieving faster feedback. Yeah. No, thanks for clarifying the question. I did try this. I just didn't know it was called that, dual track Scrum.
Thanks, Glenn, for the question, and thanks very much, Sal. We'll do
you.
a really quick turnaround, so we'll do like two minutes, and then we'll have our final speaker, Dragan. So thanks very much, Sal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, are we ready to go? Okay, we've got our final speaker now, Dragan Jojic. So while he's speaking, just think of the most difficult questions you'd like to ask him for afterwards. Isn't that right, Dragan?
Practice pronouncing my name.
Like I can't.
Like Lisa, kind of.
Kind of means it's wrong.
Why am I feeling the room is emptier than earlier? Who left?
Not me.
Right, this is me. This is half of the presentation. I'm going to tell you about me. You can read some of it if you want to. Most important things there are that I'm agnostic and pragmatic. And my favorite saying, which I think is extremely wise, but nobody else agrees, is being useful over being right. Which means that when we were told there's only one right answer for every question, I disagree with that. I think there's more than one right answer, and there's always more than one way to skin a cat. Right? And second thing is I have to mention BELIMINAL. I'm independent coach, consultant, trainer, but I'm also part of a partnership of people like myself. So I'm just going to tell you a little story which precipitated me thinking about this topic to some extent. So a few years ago, about 3 years ago, at the client that I was working at, I was talking to this project manager, really good, but fairly traditional project manager. And he said to me, he said, this Agile thing, and because it's live streaming, I can't swear. He said, it's all the same old, isn't it, Dragan? And it really hurt me. The fact that I couldn't respond with something really smart and clever and useful, I thought, I have to explore this further. It's fundamentally different. I know it, I feel it, I can't explain it. What is the difference? What is the biggest difference? And that kind of set me off on a path of trying to learn and discover and think. And there's loads of people that have been writing about what I'm going to talk to you about. But I'd be keen to hear your views as well if we get time. Before that, I would like to ask you a question. Definition of done. How many of you are familiar with the term definition of done? Most of the people. Could somebody volunteer to give me their definition of done? For them, in their team and their company, what is the definition of done?
You don't have to go back to it.
Do we need the microphone?
Just for the live stream.
You don't have to go back to it.
Once it's done, it's done. You don't have to go back to it. Okay? Can anybody do a better one? Just a challenge. I'm not saying it's a bad one. It's not an incorrect answer.
So all unit tests have passed, all integration tests have passed, and it's potentially shippable.
It's potentially shippable. Okay? 2 more. I'm sorry, there's too many of them.
The product manager or product owner said that he's happy with it because the customer said that he's happy with it.
Product owner happy with it.
The standards to which the team have agreed to operate are compliant.
And the last one here, because this man raised the hand second. Okay, yeah. This is great. We could just continue this. I don't have to talk at all.
We'll go like that. Well, it depends. It depends on the team, on the industry, but overall, yeah, it needs to be validated with the customer, what everyone has said, but also things like release notes, go to market. So yeah, it varies from.
So it could be quite elaborate, this definition of done thing, right? You've just got an It Depends certification. A guy who I know started the certification. It's called It Depends. There's only one way to pass it. When somebody asks you a question, you have to answer It Depends. One more.
The product owner or customer is satisfied that the acceptance criteria has been met. The lead designer is satisfied the UI is to an acceptable level. The tester is happy that the tests are to acceptable level, and the software team is satisfied the code is up to the acceptable level.
So they're getting longer. Okay. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
Don't blame me for too long. Taking too long.
When the software is in the hands of the customer and delivering value.
When the software is in the hands of the customer and delivering value, you just stolen what I wanted to say. So I worked with a CIO. I worked with a CIO who said it's not done until it is in the hands of the customer or user. Okay? So it's being used. I'm going to take it even further. Well, actually, I'm not going to. I'm going to use the quote from a friend of mine called Mike Burrows, who defines the definition of done like this. Done, you only done when somebody's need was met. So they're using it, and they're finding it useful, and they're getting value from it. I don't particularly care. All that you guys have said is right and useful. But until the user is using it, getting value out of it, it is not done. This is really challenging. It's provocative. Lots of people responded quite angrily to this. Mike, in his book called Agenda Shift, has a sequence of steps through which you should be going. And the first two steps are start with needs and agree on the outcomes. And that's what I want to talk to you about. But this was more like a warm-up. Right, what will we cover? I'm going to talk about the language we use, the language of outcomes, which is different, which I'm still learning, and the outcome practices and tools, because just talking about theory and telling you what this wonderful thing called outcomes is and blah, 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 it's interesting, but can we talk about some specific things? So how do I do it? How do I do it in my place? What do I use? So that's what I want to talk about. This project manager who was telling me it's all same old, same old. I think largely he was saying it because we are doing new things, claiming we are doing new things, but we're using the same language. And that language consists of at least some of these terms. So some of these terms we're not using anymore, if we're lucky. We're not doing project initiation documents, or PIDs for short. But a lot of organizations that are claiming to be agile still have project approvals. They're still talking about tasks and deliverables and requirements and user acceptance and all of these other things. So we're using the same language. How could it possibly be different when we're talking the same language as always? Okay? And you know what? Our community is not much better. So we've taken this iron triangle of project management, and we've had this great innovation. We turned it upside down. Right? This is agile. And where's quality? Quality is in the middle. It's non-negotiable, right? But it's all the same terms, and we're still talking about scope. And in Agile Manifesto, we're talking about working software, working software, working software. So I have had the pleasure and the challenge to work recently with two organizations, or rather with two teams that have nothing to do with software. And I had to rework this, because it puts them off. We're not doing software. This doesn't apply to us. Okay, so this talks about software. Scrum talks about product backlog. It talks about potentially shippable product increment. It may or may not talk about velocity, but a lot of teams doing Scrum do. It's all about outputs. As Salvatore was saying, it's all about outputs and measuring outputs. And then Kanban, with best intentions, talks about work in progress, cycle time, throughput. It's still all about outputs. Jeff Sutherland, the co-creator of Scrum, wrote a book, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. And he's a great guy and contributed to the community and to the world significantly. But I can't get my head around this title. I do not want to do twice the work. I want to get twice the value with half the work. I want to work 2 days a week and deliver loads of value. That would be a really nice thing. So another client I have been working with, well, I'm still working with them, their chief operating officer, when they were talking about, so we want to go agile, why do we want to do that? What is the goal? He said, more stuff, more quickly. That's what we want, more stuff, more quickly. And thankfully, the guys I was working with were brave enough to challenge him, and they eventually ended up with right stuff more quickly. That to me sounds much better. and is very much in line with this principle, which is, I don't know if you noticed, a theme that goes through all three talks. Interestingly enough, we never agreed it.
According to your own preamble, it should actually be more added value stuff.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's perfect. I'm not saying that's perfect.
Right, it's more added value.
Right stuff, if you think about it, could imply it's right because it delivers value, but it's a stretch. I agree. It's still stuff. Okay, so how many of you have heard of a guy called John Cutter? I find a lot of his writings very inspiring, thought-provoking. So I've stolen this from him. He says, do you sometimes feel you are just sitting in the factory cranking out software, cranking out features, and sending them down the line? And then he talks about the signs that you are working in a feature factory. And I've changed these and summarized them, but the sum of these I think are really powerful. So you don't know what you are trying to achieve and how to measure it. You are obsessed with prioritizing, but you never do the validation at the end. You treat all of the work apart from just do some new stuff as second rate. So refactoring, now we don't have time for that. You deliver roadmap, your delivery roadmap shows a list of features, and this is again my customer. It's all features, it's all outputs. So why are you doing this? They're really struggling to link those things with the outcomes. And the use of output metrics. There's nothing wrong with using output metrics, but it would be useful to use some of the other stuff, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. And we do stuff, and we've no idea what happens after that. We completely separated from the end customer. We have no idea if they're using it and if they're finding it useful. And how does that feed back to us so that we do something differently going forward? It doesn't. We just keep on working in the dark, like the product owner and developer in Salvatore's story, right? So what blew my mind fairly recently, there's a guy called Dan Vacanti who is from the Kanban community. And he started talking about outputs over outcomes. And I thought, what is that? But I think there's enough space for both of those arguments. And I'll make mine. I'll let you read his if you want to. Right. So the legendary entrepreneur and investor Dave McClure says customers don't care about your working software and your solution. The only thing they care about is the problems they have, the needs they have. And back to my friend Mike Burrows, he says, whatever you're doing, make sure you always know what it is you're doing, who you're doing it for, and why. And if you don't know answers to those questions, you may as well stop doing it, because it's likely to be wasted. Okay? So, let's talk about the language of outcomes. I thought of this yesterday, believe it or not. I thought the starting point of the Agile Manifesto kind of fits in here. So we are uncovering better ways of connecting outputs we are producing to the desired outcomes and the needs we're trying to meet. Through this work, we're starting to learn and use the language of outcomes. This is my feeble effort to use something that we all know and sometimes ignore because we all focus on those 4 values of the Agile Manifesto and forget what's above. But this is what I think we are doing. Well, at least I'm doing it, and I openly admit I'm still learning this language. So, what is the language of outcomes? What are some of the terms? So, these are the terms, and now I'm going to try to show you how I think they fit together. So, where do we start? We start with the impact we are trying to create. So, who are we serving, and what are the needs that those people have that we are trying to meet? What impacts do we want to have in the world? What would we like to have happen so that we meet those impacts? And we could call these desired outcomes. How could we make it happen? What are our options? So I took this inspiration for this from the Lean Change Management book, and there's there's links to everything at one of the last slides. So what could we be doing? What are our options? And there's always more than one. There's always more than one correct answer, right? Besides, we don't know if it's correct until we decide what to do next. So based on that option, so we pick an option, how are we going to exercise that option? How are we going to try? What are we going to try? So most of us are familiar with experiments. So there's a hypothesis, we believe that, and again, I'll articulate it again later. We're going to try an experiment, and we are going to get an outcome, and sometimes that outcome is going to be different from what we wanted and expected. So there's an actual outcome that may be different. So there's a gap. From that gap, we get an insight. Aha! So we tried this, we thought we would get that, we got something different. What does that tell us? And how does that influence the options that we have? Our view about the options may have changed now. So do we want to pursue the same thing, try another experiment, or do we want to choose something else, a different path? Because maybe the original one didn't give us what we expected. And that really is your value creation cycle. So again, this is different from what Jason Little talks about in Lean Change Management, but that was my source, that was my initial inspiration for this. And underneath this value creation cycle, all the time as we are trying to produce value, and eventually we'll hit on something that works, and we are going to get our desired outcome. And then we're going to get more of that. So we're going to start generating value. And while we're doing that, we're going through the learning and transformation cycle as well. So we're learning and we're changing ourselves, our team, and our organization. So those two cycles are embedded within one another. Does this make any sense to anybody? Is nobody leaving because it's difficult to leave? Okay. And once, as we are cycling, from now and again, it's really useful to go back and say, is that still what we want? And is that still the impact we want to achieve? Maybe we've done enough. Maybe we need to move on. Maybe we tried and we can't get it. Maybe we should try something else. So there should always be that feedback loop, that kind of where we ask ourselves, do we want more? Do we still want the same thing? Is it still the right thing to aim for? Okay? So how are we doing for time?
You're good.
So, some practices and tools. Are there any questions about what we've done so far at this point? Or are we going to save them for the end? Right, so, how many of them have come across the guy whose name is even more difficult to pronounce than mine? Gojko Ajic, my compatriot. He did this small illustrated book, a few years ago now, called Impact Mapping. This is a bastardized version of it because I changed some of the terms because what he's talking about doesn't really work for me in my weird way of thinking. So Gojko says, and I very much agree, and that's kind of what I was talking about so far. What we usually do is we start from the right. What are all the things that we can do? Oh, we have a product backlog, 175 items in the backlog. When we do them all, we'll be done. Right? And we have no idea how it leads to anything. Rather than doing that, it would be really nice to start from the left and ask yourself, why are we here? What do we really want to achieve? Who is our customer? What are their needs that we are trying to satisfy? So why are we here? And then when you go through that, then you go to ask a second question, which is, well, how could we achieve that? And that question is twofold. Who can help us or stop us from achieving it? And how would their behavior need to change in order for them to help us or not stop us from achieving it? Okay? So that's the actors, although I'm not very happy with that name, maybe players, stakeholders. Everybody influences, somebody who can influence our success. And then outcomes are really behavior changes. What are the things that we would like to achieve? So the impacts the outcomes, and only then the outputs. The outputs or capabilities. What are the combinations of people, process, technology, all of those things that could enable and support these outcomes that could potentially lead to achieving the impact that we want. Okay? So you kind of go left to right. There's kind of two certain ways to fail once you've done this. One is to do nothing. We've done it, we forget it, we just keep on doing what we were doing before. Second, I think more stupid way to fail is to try to implement everything. Okay, now we know how it all fits together, we're going to do it all. So the best way and the only way to do this is to say, okay, which paths through this map look most promising? Which of these are we going to try and measure? And I'm going to very quickly talk about metrics, and I believe Salvatore was talking about utilization, and utilization being we are busy. We're looking good because we're looking busy. So vanity metrics make us look good and busy. Oh my God, I'm so busy. My boss loves it because I'm 100% utilized, right? So he can cross-charge another department in the company. Great, right? Actionable metrics. Metrics, I can never say metrics properly. There's few. Don't measure 17 things. I always think 3 to 5 is a good number. They're easy to capture. If you need to kind of spend days and weeks and months to capture them, they're not useful. They have to be easy to capture. They have to be observable. They have to be balanced. So I was recently talking about measuring service efficiency and customer satisfaction. You focus on service efficiency, you focus on people on the, say, in the call center, reducing the time of their calls with customers. And you can do that. But if you do that without counterbalancing it, you'll probably lose customers. So you need to measure something on the other side so that you have a balanced picture. And that could be customer satisfaction. So at some point, customer satisfaction is going to drop. You know you need to stop with making it more efficient and kind of step back. And then somewhere you will find the balance. We need to be able to see when we are successful. We need to be able to see if those experiments that we're running are telling us something good about us achieving what we want to or something different. And based on that learning, we can decide and act. So they need to be actionable. And finally, and my favorite one is they need to encourage desired behavior. Measure the number of story points per sprint. What are you going to get? What are you going to get? Velocity. Sorry? Velocity, but what behavior are you going to encourage? Sorry. We're going to increase the estimation base. What was 5 points now is going to be 8 or 13, and we're going to be twice as productive like that. So that's not encouraging desired behavior, that's encouraging cheating. Measuring number of stories delivered per sprint. What's that going to encourage? We're going to break stories smaller, we're going to cheat the system, we're going to break the story smaller, and we're going to deliver more stories. But hang on, that is a good thing. Breaking things into smaller bits is a good thing. Therefore, it's encouraging desired behavior. So you really need to be careful. People will behave in line with what you measure them on. So measure them on something that's going to make them do something useful for the team and for the company. Make sense? So the impacts, outcomes, outputs, we need to measure them. We need to measure at every level. So Dan Vacanti talks about that there's a great book that he has published a couple of years ago, Actionable Agile Metrics for Predictability, that mainly talks about work in progress, cycle time, and throughput. Those are output metrics, really good, useful output metrics, but they only measure outputs. You need to figure out how to measure if you are getting the desired behavior changes and if you are getting the desired impacts. Okay? I'm going to give you an example. This is what I've done today. This is my latest change to this deck. Because of a certain person in this room, I now am working with, for the first time in my life, I'm working with a charity. I've never done any work in the so-called third sector. And I'm working with a completely non-software team. These are the guys that are working to influence the government and to engage the public. And I stole this from them with a permission. So this is their impact. Fewer children die in the conflict in Yemen. It's a bit more engaging than double our profits in the next 2 years. Right? So how are we going to measure this? So this is their example. I'm not saying it's perfect, but they're talking about rules being upheld. They're talking about perpetrators held to account, and they're talking about children recovering. And you could kind of measure these. Maybe they don't pass the easy to measure, but they're the good indicators. Okay? So how are we going to do this? Who can help us achieve this impact? Well, not at the moment because they're busy doing other things. But UK government is the main actor that they are working with to influence them to act. So how do we want UK government to act so that that's the result? So they're saying UK government pushes for peace, and UK government stops fueling the war by selling weapons to Yemen. What can we do so that we enable those behaviors, encourage, enable, or support those behavior changes? So this is the do more of or start. This is stop, changing behavior. So we could have a campaign to engage the public, to put the pressure. We could have advocacy with the government, with key players in the government as it stands. All sorts of things. But we're starting from what we want to achieve and working backwards rather than starting with all these wonderful... We have run 15 campaigns over the last year. And what have you achieved? Do you get what I'm saying? Yep. So I haven't given examples of how to measure these because I don't know. I'm not an expert in this area. I've only started working with them. But I find it really refreshing to work with a company where pretty much every employee has a sight to somebody whose needs they're trying to satisfy. Okay, so again, output metrics, outcome metrics. Second thing I wanted to share with you, maybe third if you count metrics, is the what I call value creation roadmap. So I have been for years using Roman Pichler's Go product roadmap or goal-oriented product roadmap, goal-oriented delivery roadmap. And I've only recently changed it because it didn't really fit with what I was talking about. So here you are explicitly calling out those impacts that you are working towards and calling out the outcomes that could lead to those impacts, and then looking at whatever your rhythm is. So here it is quarterly. It could be monthly. It could be every 2 weeks you do something useful. Here it is quarterly. So I know that committed is a loaded word, but we only look at committing, forecasting, whatever you want to call it, what we are currently working on. So we're not trying to commit to the next year of work. We're only committing to the next bit of work. So the stuff that we're working on in the current quarter, that's what we're focused to do. Then we have planned a number of other things that we think we will do next. And then we're aspiring to do all these things thereafter. And somebody gave me a great analogy, which I have been using since: ice, water, steam. So this is firmed up. This is solid, but if the temperature rises, crisis erupts, that will melt. So it can still change, but at the moment it is solid. Beyond that, it is still fluid. Beyond that, it's all up in the air. But we're calling it out so that we set some expectations. So I have a version of this going back, so showing the last quarter and what we have done, and it's kind of backwards. But all of the time we're linking the outputs to the outcomes we're trying to enable and those to the impacts we're trying to achieve. So this is brand new and I'm certain far from final, but I find it reasonably useful. So I want to talk to you quickly about the format of the change story. Another thing that I've stolen from different people and slightly adjusted maybe. And I really like this, because if thinking about those outcomes, that's where they are. Those are your desired outcomes you want to enable or support. So the question here is, what are you going to do? This is really describing those experiments from the diagram before. So we believe that if we do X, Y, Z, it will result in desired outcome. The key thing that people are notoriously bad at is, if successful, we expect to see. How will you know that you're successful? And that thinking is really useful to do up front. How do we know that we are successful? Well, if we see X, Y, Z. I've been through, I went through this with a team earlier today, and they created 2 change stories. I call it change story because it is about change. You're changing something by trying something. Does that make sense? Okay, and that's it. I always like to finish with 3 takeaways, but I ended up with 4. So I still believe that the old language is holding us back, and that it would be useful to learn and start using the language of outcomes. Talk about what is it that we want to achieve, what behavior change would be needed to achieve it. I really make sure you always know what you are doing, who you are doing for, and why, because it's such a simple statement and gives so much. Clearly define, communicate what you want to achieve, your desired outcomes, and how will you know when you are successful. And finally, you're not done until you have met your customer's need. Done, done, done. That's the links to some of the stuff I was talking about, and that's it. Don't ask me questions as difficult as Salvatore's.
Okay, any questions? Anyone? No
questions.
Just with the impact mapping slide, it felt like when you were talking about the problem of, we'll just do all of that. It felt like there was a missing word there. You were talking about the why and the what and the how. Isn't that question about the where? And have you looked at value chain mapping, things like Wardley mapping? Does that fit into your thinking about how you think more about outcomes rather than outputs?
So the honest answer about Wardley mapping is I saw Simon Wardley. I saw Simon do a talk about Wardley mapping about 2 years ago, and I thought, I'm not up to this yet. I'm not clever enough to understand this. And I think I may have advanced a bit, but I'm going to attend the Map Camp in October this year. So I'm hoping I'll get my head a bit more around that. But no, I haven't done much of Wardley mapping yet. There's probably loads of things you could wrap around these things.
What mapping?
Wardley. Simon Wardley is the name of the guy.
Value chain mapping.
Anything else? It's all clear. Or you had enough?
Just one simple one. Will the slides be available for all these presentations?
Oh, that's not a question for me.
I'm just going to give you the mic for the live stream.
Just a simple one. Will the slides from all presentations be available afterwards?
Yeah, the slides will be available, and we have a YouTube channel as well, so all the videos will be on there in the next few days. Okay, and we do have a question from our live streaming.
Hey.
This is fun. It's Glenn again.
My frenemy.
Hey, Glenn.
He did say he would heckle.
Okay. Right, Dragan. Do you have any guidance around how to ensure the behavior changes you want are truly connected to your impacts?
Well, I don't, but if you look at the half of the things we were talking about so if the government stops fueling the war by stopping to sell weapons to Yemen, we can prove that has happened. Then we measure has any of the impact started happening? So it's entirely possible that while that is a very desirable, we think, outcome, it may or may not lead to what we ultimately wanted to achieve. Because another country may continue selling the weapons, and therefore our efforts may be completely, well, without results. So it's a difficult one, Glenn. But you need to measure at every level. So that's the only way to do this. You need to measure at every level at the same time.
Hi. Thank you for your talk. I think one of the reasons that for me there's not a direct question is because it's quite high level. But then it led me to the question, based on everything that you have done now in Agile, what would your definition of Agile be?
Big question.
That's an easy one. So I have been perfecting the answer for years, and it's far from perfect. Do the smallest thing, the smallest, simplest, quickest thing that might deliver value or generate learning. Learn, get the feedback, learn and improve. Learning is value. It's not just a value to us, because if we learn, we'll be able to deliver more value thereafter. So do the smallest, simplest, cheapest, quickest thing that why it might deliver value. Because you don't know until you've done it. And then you get the feedback, and then you do something about the feedback. That to me is Agile. That to me is the best I could come up with.
We have time for one more if anyone else has a question. No? Otherwise?
One observation maybe.
Greg?
I don't like your shirt.
The observation talking about balanced scorecard, and you see that actually when it's done properly, well, actually even outside of the Agile domain, they also look at also the employee dimensions as well. And one of the tenets I remember is from Kelleher, from Southwest Airlines. It's delighted customers through delighted employees. And how do you measure objectively employee and team satisfaction in an Agile context that helps you deliver the outcomes that you need?
So we had a big discussion on that recently on our WhatsApp group, and I must admit I haven't read all of the stuff that was coming up. But there are people that are saying stop measuring happiness. So there's a lot of talk about happy company, measuring happiness in the company. And it's one of those, is happiness the cause or consequence? Or it's one, well,
so there are
it's
things
both.
that you can actively do in a company, you know, from a leadership, from a behavior perspective, from a cultural perspective, that actually drives the right behaviors, but it also can be permeated up, bottom up, from in an agile context.
So I have worked in companies that measured delighted employees by Net Promoter Index or Net Promoter Score, whereby it's not about recommending our product to your friends, it's about recommending our company to your friends.
So one company I worked for, with a limited utilization, actually the more utilized an employee was, the more I had to force them to go take holiday or do more training.
I'm really sorry, Greg. I'm going to have to stop it there because we've gone over. But we are going to continue the conversation in the pub. Okay, so yes, which Dragan, you kind of have to come now. So I'm going to say a big thank you to Dragan, Salvatore, Umer, Travelex for hosting us. Thank you to all you guys for coming tonight. As I said, we are going to go to the Rotunda, which is just downstairs. Apparently, we don't even need to leave the building to get there. And you can follow my colleague Ben there. He's going to take the first wave of people down to the Rotunda. I've also just been told, I've just been reminded that I never introduced myself tonight. So it was just kind of embarrassing because I don't really like doing that. But anyway, if anyone doesn't know me, my name is Lisa. Obviously, I work for TRG. And I head up Agile appointments here at TRG. So just putting that out there because I forgot to say it and I never really say it. So hello, anyone who doesn't know me. And please do join us in the pub for a beer. And thanks very much for joining us tonight. Okay, bye-bye.